Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, gangsters, zombies and poetry. It's my weekly wrap-up. Before that, let me talk to you for just 1 minute about today's sponsor, Serious Lights. So these lights are wonderful. The daylight wave technology they use provides brilliantly clear light that really makes it much easier to read. I've been using one for weeks now and I really genuinely love it. But what I wanted to talk to you about today was the configuration options they offer, because clearly, as good as the light from the light is, if it doesn't look right in your house, you're not going to want it. And honestly, I'm not sure if I'm even going to be able to get through all the configuration options in a minute, but I'm going to give it a go. So firstly, you can have either a floor lamp or a table lamp. And then for the floor lamps, you can choose whether you have a heavy base to give it more stability or a lighter base to make it easier to move. And then there are 3 accent colours you can choose for the flexible arm to really tailor the look. They even offer a version with 2 separate lights, the Gemini, which I think is absolutely fantastic. You can also configure the carrying handle in different colours, and opt for a cordless option which allows you to use the lamp when you're not near a plug. These really are fantastic lights. Do check them out. There'll be a link in the description to this video for more information, and you can use the code OLLIE24 to get £100 off your first order. Okay, onwards with the rest of the video. So as usual for one of these Saturday wrap-ups, I'll talk about what I've read, talk about what I'm reading now, and then talk about what's been on the channel and what's coming up on the channel. And don't forget, if you missed it, I'm also now publishing a weekly newsletter via Substack and WordPress that you can sign up for. There'll be a link in the description if you want like a written summary of my week rather than me babbling at you from the screen. Okay, so a few different things read this week. So the first thing I finished, which I think I was reading when I made this video last week, was this short story collection, Nightmares in Geezenstacks by Fredric, which my dad very kindly sent me a copy of. This was really, really fun. So Fredric was a very prolific writer of science fiction, but also crime fiction. I talked about his book, The Screaming Mimi, a couple of weeks ago. This was a really interesting, really inventive collection. The thing that stands out about this collection is a lot of the stories are incredibly short, like 1 or 2 pages kind of length. There are later on in the collection some longer ones that are more kind of typical short story length, but the majority of the stories are really, really short and just fun, really, really fun. Very inventive, a mix of like some science fiction, some horror, some crime, some that I would describe as kind of like bawdy, shaggy dog type stories. So some that basically feel like long jokes where there's kind of a twist at the end that's the punchline. There were a couple of stories that definitely haven't aged well, that feel like they might originally have been published as short stories in Playboy or something like that, and were a little bit iffy to a modern reader, shall we say. But for the most part, a really fun, inventive collection. A couple of collaborations with another science fiction author called Mac Reynolds, who I had a book by and read a book by in my teens, which I think was called The Fracas Factor or something like that. And it's a book I've been meaning to try and get a copy of and reread. So this has reminded me I wanted to do that. But yeah, overall, just a very entertaining collection. After that then, I read the second book for my novel life challenge, which is a challenge where I read a book from every year I've been alive, a novel starting from my year of birth, 1973. I'm now up to the second year, 1974. So I read a book called Jack Carter's Law by a British author called Ted Lewis. So this is written after, but a prequel to the book Jack's Return Home by Ted Lewis, which was filmed famously as Get Carter with Michael Caine. So Get Carter, or Jack's Return Home, features this character Jack, who's a gangster who lives in London. He's not like a big deal gangster. He's kind of like an enforcer. He works with or works for these 2 gangsters and like sort stuff out for them basically. In Jack's Return Home, he goes back up north to where he's from because his brother's died, and it ends up being about him investigating his brother's death. So Jack Carter's Law, as I say, is a prequel to that, and it's just about him being a gangster in London. And I didn't like it nearly as much as I liked Jack's Return Home. Jack's Return Home I thought was absolutely phenomenal, really strong novel. This one feels like a book that Ted Lewis wrote to cash in on the success of Jack's Return Home. And whereas in that book you get this fantastic, well, there's two things that are fantastic about Jack's Return Home, I think. One is the fact that you've got this kind of almost like a fish out of water thing. I always like stories where someone goes back home and has to like reacquaint themselves with what it was like to live there. And you've got this great thing in Jack's Return Home where Carter, who is who's this tough guy and who is like has made himself into a Londoner, goes back up to like the provincial north and has to kind of try and fit in up there again. So you've got this, it's kind of a fish out of water, but it's water he was familiar with, if that makes sense. So that element of it is fantastic. And then the other thing that's really interesting about it is it's about a part of the UK you don't see that much. Now there were, in the 60s and 70s, there were more books about the north of England than there have been previously, but it's still not a familiar place for me as a reader. So the problem then with Jack Carter's Law is it's set in London, which is a really familiar place, and it's just about London gangsters. And it feels there was a wave in the UK of like London gangster type nostalgia almost in the 90s, which I found quite tiresome at the time. And this feels very much like that, although it was written clearly in the 70s. So yeah, basically it's like a gangster style crime thriller with Carter running around London trying to sort stuff out. There's a guy who's like was one of the mob who's like grassed to the police basically. So there's loads of action, really quite tense at times, but it just didn't have that something extra that Jack's Return Home had. Definitely talked long enough about that one. So the next thing I read was much more fun, and that was Sherlock Holmes Zombies Over London by Stephen Mertz. So Stephen Mertz very kindly sent me a copy of this in one of his other books a little while ago. This was really, really entertaining. So Stephen Mertz is a writer of kind of pulpy, enjoyable fiction who's been doing it since the 80s. So was someone who wrote a load of like men's adventure type books, including the Able Team book I read recently, actually, under house names, but more recently is publishing stuff under his own name. So I read a Western novel by him a while ago called Zombies Over Yonder. This one is Zombies Over London, and has Sherlock Holmes. So the Sherlock Holmes that's in this book feels a bit more muscular, shall we say, than Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. There's lots of kind of James Bondy type stuff in here. It's a bit steampunky. It's got zombies. It's got Holmes up against Moriarty, who's got like this zombie army. It's got airships. It's got like gyrocopters. It's got all sorts of stuff going on. It's also got Albert Einstein as a character and H.G. Wells. It was just really, really fun, really fast-paced, quite humorous at times, loads of action, just a very, very enjoyable read. So yeah, enjoyed that hugely. After that then, I read a book that was sent to me for review by the author a little while ago, Headhunters by Louis Paredes. So this is a book that I would say is not necessarily my kind of thing, but I did think it was very well done. So it's kind of, I guess I would classify it as kind of dark fantasy. So it's about this young kid whose grandfather has died, but he can see the ghost of his grandfather. And it's about a battle between them and some like a friend of the kids, and that friend's aunt. A battle between them and a load of demons who look like giant praying mantises. So it was definitely entertaining. There was some lovely like family type stuff in here. So both about the kind of human found family, if you like, that this kind of cluster of people working together, but also about the demons and like their hierarchy and their relationships between each other. So there was a really interesting contrast there between those two groups. Lots of nice humour as well, lots of kind of action and really inventive in terms of its depiction of the demons and like the demon realm, if you like. But yeah, dark fantasy isn't really necessarily my kind of thing. So whilst I enjoyed it, I don't think I enjoyed it as much as someone who likes that kind of thing would have enjoyed it. So if that's your bag, I definitely say this is worth checking out. What was next? I can't read my writing. Next was, and it's on my lap, so I didn't need to read my writing. So next was the book of poetry. So I've said on the channel before, I'm someone who I don't consider that I like poetry, and I don't normally choose to read poetry. But that said, whenever I do pick up a volume of poetry, and there's one up on the shelf there, Hey Bert by Roberto Pastori. Whenever I do pick up a volume of poetry, I find I actually enjoy it. So maybe I should seek out some more poetry. So anyway, this is Permanent Verb by Gareth Howells. So Gareth is the host of the channel Book Songs and Other Magic. And this is a collection of his poems. And I really liked it. So I didn't like absolutely love every poem in here. You know, like short story collections, I think poetry collections, you know, typically end up being often are a mixed bag, shall we say. But some of the poems in here I thought were wonderful and really like tapping into quite deep emotional stuff. A lot of them obviously came from, you know, like personal experiences of Gareth and things like that, and they were very emotional and very, very articulately done. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I like I say, I think I need to try some more poetry, because I say I don't like it, but whenever I read it, I enjoy it, and this was no exception. Right, so in terms of currently reading then, so I've got two things on the go at the moment. So one is Titanium Noir by Nick Harkaway, which is the Criminology Book Club pick this month. So I have a book club that I run with my patrons and channel members. If you're interested in joining, link in the description. This is really interesting. So it's a sci-fi detective novel. And when I say that, it's my favourite kind of sci-fi detective novel. In that it's basically about a world which is essentially the same as ours, but there's one thing that's really different, which is like the sci-fi thing. And apart from that, it's written like a normal detective novel. So this is about a guy who's like a kind of consultant who works with the police. So he's not a law enforcement officer, but he works with the police, who's investigating the death of this guy. And there's I'm not going to spoil it by telling you what it is, but there's something unusual about this guy who's died, and that unusual thing is linked to like the sci-fi thing that you know makes this world different from ours. It's just really fun so far. The central concept I think is really, really interesting. And to be honest with you, the central concept is probably ruined or spoiled in the blurb for the book, but you don't get to what it is until, you know, you've read a little bit of it, till you're about kind of 5-10% in. And I really enjoyed that gradual revelation of what was going on, of what's different. So I'm not going to spoil it in this video, because if you choose to read that book, I've got real pleasure from that revelation. But yeah, like the detective stuff is really, really well done. It's really interestingly written. There's a great scene. So where I am at the moment, there's been lots of scenes of just like the detective character going around interviewing people, and they're all done in a slightly different style in terms of how he relays to you as the reader the information he's got from that character. I think it's really a really skillfully written detective novel, so I'm enjoying that very much. And then the other thing I'm reading is something very different, but also super, super fun. It's A Dark and Subtle Light by Mark Hodder. So this comes out, I think, in October. So I'm reading it in order to do a review video for it in October. So this is again kind of science fiction-y. I guess you would call it alternative history. So it's set in the past, and it's about like an ongoing battle between some people who are like immortals. And including the hero Machiavelli, who is Machiavelli. So Machiavelli is this immortal guy who can keep on. He has to die, but he comes back again to do like these kind of adventures. And in this one, he's going up against a load of fascists who are kind of infected by this otherworldly force. So it's just a really entertaining kind of historical adventure, but with this interesting kind of sci-fi stuff layered over the top of it. I'm having a really good time with it. I'm about halfway through, and it's just a really, really fun read, and it's gradually kind of building up in terms of the tension, and I think the action's going to like really, really kick off soon. But it's been very entertaining so far. So yeah, enjoying that. And we'll be continuing reading both of those things over the weekend and into next week. I'll probably finish both of them, and then I think I'm going to be reading the penultimate Patricia Highsmith novel for the read through of all of her work that I've been doing with Anne from the channel and Novella. So yeah, I think we're going to pick up that this week. That is Ripley Underwater. So that's the book stuff. In terms of the channel stuff then, so in the last week you had an extra video from me this week, I'm afraid. Apologies for that. And you're going to get an extra video from me next week as well, but in both cases on the Wednesday. So the extra video you had in the week just gone was my announcement video for Occult Detective October. which takes place in October and is a reading event themed around the idea of occult detectives. So occult detectives being detectives who investigate kind of supernatural, paranormal kind of goings on. So we did the event last year. It was created by MJ from the channel Reading This Life. It was really, really fun this last year. Hoping it's going to be, well, I'm sure it's going to be really fun this year as well. So yeah, you had an announcement video for that. You had an update video on my attempts to give up my Kindle, which have been very, very successful. So I'm really pleased with that decision. You had my review of I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. You had a channel update where I'm talking about, where I talk about what I'm going to be doing on the channel in the next few months, and also what I'm doing outside of YouTube, including that newsletter that I talked about earlier. And then a video where I talk about extreme horror, kind of my views of extreme horror, and a request for people to recommend me some extreme horror books. In the week ahead then, I think you're going to get a video where I talk about like how I do the channel in the background, how I organise things in the background, which I thought some people might find interesting. I expect lots of people won't find it interesting at all, but some people might find it interesting. So I'm going to do a video on that. I'm going to do a video where, so a while ago I did a video talking about 10 books I've had for ages, and I got loads of comments from people on that video. So I thought it'd be interesting to do a video where I talk about how I've now prioritised those 10 books based on the comments that I got from people, if that makes sense. What's next? You're going to get a review of I'm starting to worry about this Black Box of Doom by Jason Pargin. And you're going to get my announcement video for something new. So this will be the extra Wednesday video. So yeah, I'm not going to say what it is now, but tune in on Wednesday for an exciting announcement. And then you're also going to get my review of the Big Me B751C like e-ink tablet, which I've been using recently. So that's it. That's the weekly wrap up for this week. Let me know what you've been reading in the comments. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.